Yo, what's up guys? Coming at you. Just got back from Atlantic City Regionals where I did manage to win the whole thing with Mew-GX. This list that we have right in front of us here right now. So I'm gonna be just doing a deck profile video for today's video. No gameplay, just gonna kind of go a little bit more in depth on why I played some cards and why I chose not to play other cards. That I've kind of been playing around with quite a bit, that you've probably seen me playing in the Mewtwo box, you know, leading up to this event. I went through quite a few iterations of the deck, and this was the final one that I ended on the morning of the event, and managed to use to take down the whole thing. So let's go ahead and get into it. So there's nothing really too Jurassic about this list. This isn't quite like nothing quite as Jurassic as something like what Tord played over in Germany. I believe he was playing in Germany. He won himself with a Mewtwo box, which I will be making a video on eventually. Quite the wacky list from Tord for sure. This thing a little bit more straightforward. Just kind of changed around a couple of the tech cards and consistency cards a little bit from the previous iteration of the deck that I used at a league, used to win a League Cup just the week before. So the only change I actually made from that list was -1 Acro Bike and plus the 4th Dedenne. So to kind of talk about that change a little bit, the 4th Dedenne, I mean, they're both consistency cards overall, right? And the thing about Acro Bike is you can use as many as you can find during a turn, whereas the Dedenne is limited to 1. But you usually do use 2 to 3 Dedenne throughout a game, especially for your first couple turns. You're usually using 1 or 2 almost immediately in your first 2 turns. Unless you draw, unless you just open the Welder draw and it's a matchup where you can kind of play it a little bit slower early on. You're usually going Dedenne turn 1 to Dedenne turn 2, finding cards, giving yourselves options, and so on. The big thing about the 4 Dedenne is that because it's easier to draw into and find the Dedenne without having to use a Cherish Ball, it frees up your Cherish Ball to find everything else, all your tech attackers, whatever else you might need for the turn. Maybe you need to find the Solgaleo for Turbo Strike. Maybe you need to find the Espeon Deoxys, maybe you need the Jirachi, any of your GX Pokemon. It frees up the Cherish Balls to find those cards instead of having to go Cherish Ball for the Dedenne to draw cards to then try and find those cards and then find a way to discard them. You can just Cherish Ball for the guy and then discard him with the Dedenne change. I did find myself trying to use Acro Bike a lot of times to try and find a way to discard a Pokemon, or to find a way to get the Pokemon in my hand to then discard it. So just by having the 4th Dedenne, it helped it make everything a little bit smoother, as well as you open Dedenne pretty frequently with this deck. There's a lot of Dedennes. You'd prefer to open Dedenne than Espeon Deoxys or any of the Pokemon with the 2 retreat cost. So you would usually opt to open Dedenne over something like a Wobbuffet, the Espeon Deoxys, or the Mewtwo, if you have the choice, unless you have the Switch in hand and a way to find a Mewtwo. You're usually opting to open the Dedenne, and that made it feel so much nicer to open the Dedenne when you knew you had 3 left in deck. So you'd almost for sure be able to utilize 2 pretty aggressively early on, and if you needed the 3rd, it was still potentially in there if you didn't discard it with another one, or the 3rd one wasn't prized, or even if it is prized, you would have time to get it out of the prize cards. So the 4 Dedenne was spectacular. Would definitely continue running 4 Dedenne in the deck from here on out. 100%. It makes everything so much smoother. It's better. It's the 3rd best starter behind the Mewtwo and the Latios. I think Latios is probably the... If you don't know what you're playing against, Latios is the best starter, but if you do know what you're playing against, then sometimes Mewtwo is just better. Kind of depends on the matchup. But behind them is the Dedenne. Even though you do want to utilize him with the Dedenne change, you can still hard retreat him turn 1 and Turbo Strike in the same turn through the Welder onto a Mewtwo. So it allows you to get off that turn 1 Turbo Strike, even opening something that is not the Mewtwo. That's the big thing. The big reason that the opening Dedenne is better than anything with the 2 retreat costs. You can get 3 energy and play on a turn, so it still allows you to Turbo Strike even if you open him up. So yeah, run with him from there. I kept the 2 Reset Stamp, used them a lot throughout the tournament. You don't use them every game. The games you're ahead, you're playing to not get Reset Stamped, which is fine. But then there are the games where you fall behind, which is where the Reset Stamps come into play to give yourself a little bit of that comeback potential. So yeah, continue running these guys as well. Cards that I didn't play, the Giratina, the Reshizard, the Muck. So with the Giratina, it's good against Guardian and Keldeo, but my thought process was Nightquake isn't very good right now. I thought more Pikaroms would be playing more Power Plants, so I was like, Nightquag just going to lose to all the Pikaroms. Pikaroms really were not playing that much Power Plant at this event, which did surprise me a little bit. I expected way more Power Plant, which kind of sketched me out to not playing, which sketched me out a little bit for not playing the Marshadow. I was a little bit nervous about not playing the Marshadow because I expected so much more Power Plant in the Pikaroms, but it just didn't exist, so that worked out pretty well. So I didn't think Nightquag would really be a factor. And the only thing, Giratina is good against Malamar, but it's unnecessary to win games against Malamar. It does make it a little bit easier sometimes, but some games it doesn't actually even do anything. So yeah, didn't really find the Giratina to be necessary. So didn't end up running him. Didn't expect to really show up at all. Nightquag, it was prevalent, decently prevalent in day 2 of the event actually. And then for the Guardian matchup, if you want to beat Guardian consistently, you have to play not only the Giratina, but also the Double Blaze Charizard, which I definitely did not want to run at all. I found the card to be super unnecessary and not that great against anything else besides Guardian. It's like situationally good for Flare Strike, but its GX attack. GX attack almost never gets used unless you're up against the Guardian or a Nightquag, so didn't want to run it. I was like, those two matchups are still tough even if you have those cards. So not worth running. This Charizard does enough. He does 300 damage for only 4 energy. That's all you need most of the time. Didn't want to run that. Didn't want to make the deck any clunkier. Wanted the deck to be as smooth as possible. I don't find the deck to be clunky overall, but yeah, I didn't want to make the deck. I wanted the deck to be as unclunky as possible. So didn't want to run any check cards if I could come up with a reason to not run them. So yeah, I was like, Guardian, gonna lose to all the abilities arts or just Firebox decks in general. Not worth playing. I thought all the Nightquags would lose to the Pikaroms. I'm sure they lost to some of the Pikaroms, but not a lot of the Pikaroms actually played Power Plant. So Nightquag actually ended up being a better play than I thought it was going to be for the event overall. So yeah, that's why I didn't play any of those cards. There's the Muck tech as well. Blacephalon is a deck that I didn't think was super good going into the event because I thought your Firebox matchup was super poor. Your Pikarom matchup was also pretty rough. The Pikaroms has a lot of options into like dealing with the Beast Ring turns and how to play around the Beast Ring turns. Tag Ball is one of them, but like definitely not the most consistently utilized one, and definitely not necessary to beat Blacephalon as Pikarom. You can kind of just like paralyze Blacephalons with Raichu, and then clean it up with a Zapdos or a Hoopa. There's a whole ton of things Pikarom can do to mess with Blacephalon. Like I said, Blacephalon I think was unfavored against Firebox decks, which I thought was going to be the most popular deck at the event. I'm actually not quite sure if it was or wasn't. Even though it didn't have a great day 2 showing, I think the deck was still very popular in day 1 for sure. And Blacephalon can also struggle against Malamar. So the Muck tech, super good against Blacephalon. You just trap the first Blacephalon, have it get knocked out coming back into your turn, then you chase another GX in play and knock that out, and the game's pretty much over. So the Muck, super good against Blacephalon. Not very good in Mirror Match, because that means you're using your GX attack and praying they don't have a switch. And it's okay against Guardian, but it's only good against Guardian if you have some other text to back it up. The Muck itself will not beat Guardian if the Guardian player knows what they're doing. You need the Giratina or a Charizard, something else to be able to do damage to their Pokemon. Poisoning them with the first attack is pretty nice, but you still need to, like, that'll maybe get you through one Guardian eventually, but you still need to get through another Guardian. You have to draw your other 3 prize cards. So yeah, didn't want to run the Muck. The Blacephalon matchup is fine without it. I thought a bunch of the other popular decks in the meta just took care of Blacephalon already, so I wasn't worried about that. And the matchup is fine without it as well. It's okay in Mirror, not worth the spot in my opinion for the Mirror match. If your opponent knows it's in your deck, it becomes almost useless in my opinion. So it's good as like a surprise for potentially a game 1, but once your opponent knows you play the Muck in the Mirror match, it becomes pretty much useless. Once again, not worth it for the Mirror match. Only good if you expect a ton of Blacephalon. It's the only reason I'd run Muck in the Mew-GX deck. If you expect a ton of Blacephalon, or you are trying to beat Guardian while also adding in like a Giratina or the Charizard to help you out in that matchup as well, because the Muck can't beat Guardian by itself. You need something else that give you some other way to like damage a Guardian. Just poisoning them, they will still win eventually. Just having Double Blaze is also not quite enough. You need something else. You need the Giratina, the Muck, something else. The combination of those, 2 of those 3 guys will actually give you a fighting chance against the Guardian deck. I think that's maybe all I wanted to talk about. No builds analysis. I just found it to be kind of unnecessary. I felt like being able to just Mind Report for that extra Welder, and also For Dedenne, you just don't really need the build analysis. I felt like the minor port gave you the reach that you kind of needed against, or to find stuff like custom catchers and stuff. You could just go like minor port, use another, like if you have one custom catcher in hand, sure, a build would be nice at that point to find second custom catcher. But overall, you're just trying to use Welder for your first 3 or 4 turns anyways. So I'd rather have just more access to Welder than one less access to Welder, but +1 access to a builds analysis by just playing a builds analysis over, I don't know, something in the deck. So if anything, I'd rather play like 2 minor port Mewtwo before I even added a builds analysis into this deck, or maybe a Pal Pad. But yeah, definitely wouldn't play builds analysis anymore. I think it's definitely unnecessary. Just using Welder to give yourself that reach when you're digging for custom catchers and so on, I think is more than enough. The builds analysis definitely like guarantees it a little bit more. You know, looks at 7 cards to, you know, dig for that last custom catcher or whatever it might be. But usually your deck's thin enough at the end that, and even to get to the point where you just need to find that custom catcher to win the game, you have to be playing Welder. So I'd rather just make sure I get the Welders early on and often, and then get to the custom catchers eventually, use those, win the game. Yeah, I think that's all I want to talk about the list. Went over what cards I didn't play, why I didn't play them. The only real change, like I said, is that 4th Dedenne. I went over why I liked him. Just makes the deck a little bit smoother. And yeah, this is what I played. Atlantic City Regionals, where I did take the win. Feels super good to get another regional dub. It's been a little while. Got 2 second places last season. So definitely feeling good. Starting off the season with a win. There's a lot of cool decks that came out of both the regionals over the weekend. Definitely going to be taking a look at Tord's deck for sure. We might take a look at one of the Pidgey decks that got 2nd place at both the regionals. There was a Baby Bucephalon deck that looked really interesting and some other stuff. So there's definitely a whole bunch of decks that I'm going to be coming at you guys with that came from the regional championships over the weekend. Getting back into the swing of things and making YouTube videos. Going to be streaming as well, as always, Monday to Friday, starting at 12 p.m. Eastern on those days. And that's all I got, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like. If you're enjoying the content, be sure to subscribe. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. Have a good day. Thanks for watching, and peace.